If you hear the hiss, you're already in the tape. My name is Mara, and I wish I could say I never meant to press play. But I did, and now the hiss follows me even when the studio is silent, a wet whisper behind my teeth that tastes of rust and old pennies. It started last Thursday. Well, technically Friday, because the wall clock had just thumped its hands past 11:59. I was alone in the station, just me and the ghosts of every song request that ever died on hold. I'd gone scavenging for filler music in the storage closet we still call the Asylum Annex, because the building used to be exactly that before the college bought it for $1 and a promise. Shelves of cassettes nobody cataloged since the early 90s leaned over me like drunks sharing secrets. My fingers found something wedged so tight I had to yank twice. The case was matte black, no label, warm as skin. The moment it touched my palm, the overhead bulb buzzed louder, like it resented the intrusion. I told myself it was just old wiring. Back in the booth, I slid the tape into the deck, expecting 20 minutes of dead air I could fill with my usual midnight monologue about existential dread and dining hall meatloaf. Instead, the hiss rose gentle as breath. It wasn't static, it was velvet. I leaned closer, and the hiss shaped itself into gravel crunching under tires. I swear I felt cold wind slip through the locked studio door. The lamp overhead and the broadcast stuttered. On, off, on, a heartbeat with arrhythmia. My own pulse tried to match it. The clock ticked 12. And every receiver within 30 miles, clock radios, truck dashboards, thrift store Walkmans, clicked to our frequency like iron filings to a magnet. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was the voice that crawled out next wasn't mine. It was low, genderless, older than the building. Whisper, welcome to the frequency, where all roads lead back. The street lamp in the sound flickered faster, each strobe revealing a little more of the road ahead. Except there was no ahead, only the same stretch repeating like a tape loop. I tried to pull the faders down, but my hands were suddenly heavy, palms glued to the vinyl finish as if the desk had grown warm teeth. Somewhere in town, car engines coughed and died at red lights, their drivers staring at radios they hadn't touched. I heard doors opening in the hallway outside the booth, slow, like someone unsure the floor would hold. No footsteps followed. The voice on the tape sighed, content. It said, "We are all passengers now." And then the hiss widened, swallowing every other sound until even my own heartbeat folded into it. That's when I noticed the counter wasn't moving. The tape should have ended 4 minutes ago, yet the reels kept turning, pulling more ribbon from nowhere, the same black ribbon that now dripped off the edge of the table and pooled on the floor like ink. I tried to scream, but the hiss slid between my teeth, tasting of wet gravel and burnt sodium. Somewhere, somebody started walking down the asylum corridor toward the booth. The clock still said 12. It would always say 12. And the voice, soft as a lullaby, whispered my name from every speaker at once. Mara, you're already in the tape. I haven't found the stop button yet. And the footsteps are almost at the door. If you're hearing this, the frequency has you too. Next chapter, I'll tell you what waits on the other side of the hiss. Assuming I can still speak at all. I never made it to the stop button. The hiss swallowed everything. My fingers, the console, the whole studio, until the only thing left was the sound of an engine that wasn't mine. And then I wasn't sitting anymore. I was standing. We were standing. All of us, shoulder to phantom shoulder, on a highway that tasted like pennies left in a freezer. The road stretched forward and backward into nothing. Tar so fresh it steamed, even though the air felt like January teeth. Headlights kept blooming behind us, white, then blue, then the color of old bruises. But the beams passed straight through our collective ribs without lighting a single face. I tried to count us. You ever try to count smoke? Every time I reached for a shoulder, it folded into static and reformed 2 steps ahead. We were one body with 1,000 heartbeats, and each beat sounded like tape flapping against plastic spools. Somewhere inside that rhythm, a voice, not mine, not yours, began to whisper numbers. Latitude first, longitude second, a lullaby of prison coordinates that made my tongue swell with rust. A mile marker appeared, simple green reflective board staked into the shoulder. It read 00:00. I blinked. It reset. I blinked again and felt the whole caravan blink with me, a ripple of eyelids that sounded like rain on dry leaves. The marker didn't lie, it just refused to move forward. Static began to fall. Not snow, not ash, but the hiss itself given weight. Each flake hissed when it touched the road, dissolving into tiny pools of mirror-bright mercury. I opened my mouth to ask who was driving this march, and a flake landed on my tongue like a cold staple. It tasted of iron and burnt cassette ribbon. Oh, I spat, but the taste only spread, copper wiring my thoughts together so every word I thought arrived pre-looped. The whisper sharpened. East 3 degrees, north 4, basement level, hydrotherapy pool dry since 1973. The coordinates tugged at our shared ankles, dragging the mass of us another impossible step. The highway responded by splitting, hairline cracks racing outward until the center line looked like a vein about to burst. I felt the asylum before I saw it. Bricks tasting of bleach and forgotten birthdays. Windows exhaling mold spores across 20 miles of dead air. But the building wasn't ahead. It was beneath, pulsing under the asphalt like a second heart. Every footfall pressed the road thinner, and I swear I heard linoleum squeak under the tar. Someone at the front of our Phantom Parade began humming the hold music from a phone call that never ended. The tune vibrated the cracks wider. The headlights behind us finally slowed. Not stopping, nothing stops here, but matching our pace. Two funeral bright eyes that wanted to read the barcode of our spines. I turned, or we turned, and saw the car had no driver. Just a reel-to-reel on the passenger seat spinning slow, feeding black ribbon out through the cracked windshield where the wipers smeared it across the glass like mascara. The whisper grew teeth. Arrival, -3 cycles. Prepare the beds. The water remembers. I tried to pull away, to peel myself out of the collective skin, but the static snow had stitched us together with silver thread. Each flake was a memory we hadn't lived yet. Fluorescent lights clicking on, a gurney wheel squeaking, the smell of oatmeal mixed with antiseptic. I tasted lunch from 1982 and gagged on powdered eggs. Up ahead, or maybe below, the mile marker reset again, but this time the zeros bled. Thick black liquid dripped from the reflective surface and spelled a new number on the road, -1. The asphalt buckled. A rectangular outline appeared, the exact size of a cassette door. I felt the collective inhale, 1,000 lungs drawing in static. Somewhere inside that void, water began to run. No, not water. Magnetic tape. Thousands of feet unfurling like intestines, each foot labeled with a name we hadn't earned yet. And at the center, a single plastic reel spun counterclockwise, waiting for the next arrival. The headlights behind us revved. The whisper counted down, and the road, patient as a trap, began to close its mouth. The headlights behind us snapped off with a wet click, and the road folded us into darkness like a letter no one wanted to read. I felt the car drop, not downward, but inward, as though gravity had changed its mind and decided we belonged somewhere else entirely. When the tires finally stopped humming, we were idling at the rust-flaked gates of Black Hollow Asylum. The metal bars twisted into the shape of a cassette reel, teeth biting their own tail. The building loomed, a cracked monolith of sooty brick and broken windows, each pane flickering with a pale green glow that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel that sounded suspiciously like crushed plastic, and the gate swung inward without a touch, hinges screaming like tape being yanked too fast. I crossed the threshold and the air thickened, warm and metallic, tasting of iron oxide and childhood dread. The lobby stretched farther than the outside suggested, a corridor that curved back on itself like a Mobius strip, lined with television sets stacked to the ceiling. Each screen showed a different room. My old bedroom, my grandmother's attic, a school bathroom I'd prayed no one would ever see, and every image jittered with static snow that whispered my name. Not the one my parents gave me, but the secret one I only ever thought. I reached to touch a screen, and the glass rippled, cold as winter breath, sucking at my fingertips until I yanked free and left skin behind like shed magnetic tape. Somewhere deeper, a reel-to-reel machine began to spin, empty spools turning with a patient tick-tick-tick that echoed inside my ribs. The cassette voice. No. The voice that had once been many spoke from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of every scream ever recorded. It said, "Welcome to the archive. Your fear is already cataloged." I laughed, because what else could I do? But the sound came out warped, slowed down, as though the air itself were stretching the moment. I walked, and the corridor walked with me, doors appearing on either side, each labeled with a year I recognized. 1994, 2003, last Tuesday. Behind every door, someone I once loved sat watching themselves on a grainy monitor, eyes wide, mouths open in silent howls. I pushed open the door marked with my birth year and stepped into my childhood kitchen. Except the table was made of videotape, the chairs of snapped cassette shells. On the countertop, a small television showed me at 7, hiding beneath that same table while something heavy dragged across the floor above. I tasted copper and realized my lip had split without feeling it. The voice crooned, "We spliced to survive. One more layer and the reel is full." The walls began to inch inward, tape unspooling from hidden reels in the ceiling, slithering down like magnetic ivy. I bolted back into the hallway and the doors slammed shut one by one. Each thud a heartbeat skipped. The corridor narrowed until my shoulders brushed both sides, the wallpaper peeling away to reveal coils of tape beneath, labels fluttering like moths, regret, failure, loneliness. I tasted static on my tongue, sharp and electric, and my vision pixelated around the edges. Ahead, a single doorway glowed the same phosphor green as the void in the road, and through it I could see the reel-to-reel machine, tall as a man, its chrome spools spinning empty, but roaring like a turbine. I stepped into the chamber and the noise stopped, sudden and absolute, the way a scream ends when the throat gives out. The machine stood on a pedestal of rusted film canisters, its feed arm extended like a begging hand. A fresh reel lay beside it, pristine, unlabeled, waiting. The voice softened, almost gentle. "One memory, just one. Place it here and the loop breaks." But whose memory? I looked back and saw faces in the doorway, my own at different ages, each one mouthing the same silent plea. The youngest stepped forward, holding a small plastic rectangle, the first cassette I ever recorded, my voice on it small and brave and stupidly hopeful. The machine whirred, impatient, and I realized the reel wasn't empty after all. It was already half filled with the sound of me deciding. I reached for the offered cassette, fingers trembling, and the youngest me smiled with teeth made of magnetic grains. Somewhere deep in the walls, a countdown began. 3, 2, but the numbers weren't in order, and the voice wasn't counting down at all. It was counting up, adding my name to the list already etched inside the tape. The reel lunged forward, hungry, and I understood that the loop never breaks. It only grows longer, swallowing every decision I hadn't yet made. I took one step toward the machine, and the chamber door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking like a tape case snapping closed. The lock clicked behind me, a sound like teeth snapping shut on bone, and I felt the air thicken until breathing became a conscious act of rebellion. The reel-to-reel machine had grown taller somehow, its spools spinning with the lazy confidence of something that had all the time in the world. Which I suppose it did. I reached for the power switch, but my fingers passed through it like it was made of smoke. That was when I noticed the others. They stood in a perfect circle around the machine, maybe 12 of them, their faces turned toward the spinning reels like flowers following the sun, only the sun was made of magnetic tape, and it was eating them alive. Each person had a silver thread extending from their temple, stretching impossibly thin until it disappeared into the spinning spool. Their memories, I realized. The machine wasn't just recording sound anymore. It was recording lives. Every birthday, every first kiss, every moment of heartbreak, winding away like old film. The woman nearest me, red coat, sensible shoes, began to shimmer at the edges. Not metaphorically, literally, her outline vibrated like television static, and then her face began to smear sideways, colors draining into grayscale that dripped off her chin and pooled at her feet. She didn't scream. They never did. They just stood there, offering up their existence like it was the most natural thing in the world. I backed away until my spine hit the microphone stand. The same microphone I'd been speaking into for 3 hours, though it felt like 3 lifetimes. The metal was warm against my back, pulsing with the heartbeat of something that had never been alive. The tape was growing longer, fatter, feeding on 23 years of human experience and still hungry for more. That's when I understood what the loop really was. Not a circle, but a spiral. Every story the tape consumed became part of its next broadcast, luring more listeners, harvesting more memories, growing stronger. We weren't just trapped. We were fertilizer. But the microphone. The microphone was still mine, still connected to the board, still feeding directly into the machine. If the tape wanted stories so badly, maybe it would take one more. The last one it would ever eat. I gripped the microphone like a drowning woman clutches driftwood. My name is Mara Chen, I said, and my voice cracked like old vinyl. And this is how I die. The machine hesitated. Just for a heartbeat, the reels stuttered in their endless rotation. Good. I had its attention. I was born in October, I continued, forcing my voice steady, during the worst storm in 50 years. The power went out, and my mother used a flashlight to see my face for the first time. She always said I arrived with the lightning. The silver threads connecting the others began to pulse brighter, feeding my words directly into their stolen memories. They were becoming me, even as I was becoming nothing. A fair trade, maybe. I fell in love exactly twice, I said, watching the redcoat woman's face shift and settle into my features. First with a boy who collected broken clocks, then with a woman who spoke in questions. Both of them left me with time I couldn't keep and answers I never wanted. The machine whined, a sound like metal crying. The reel spun faster, desperate to keep up with the narrative I was feeding it. But here's the thing about death. It's the only story that has no sequel. No matter how many times you rewind it, it still ends the same way. I'm 31 years old, I whispered into the microphone, and the word old echoed back in 12 different voices. And I'm choosing this ending because it's mine to choose, because some loops deserve to be broken, even if breaking them means breaking everything. The red light on the machine began to stutter, flashing SOS in a language only the damned could read. The silver threads connecting the others started to dim, their stolen faces beginning to reassemble into something human again. But I could feel my own edges starting to blur, my memories unwinding like cassette tape in reverse. And when I'm gone, I said, my voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The silence that follows won't be empty. It'll be full of all the stories that were never told. Including this one. Including this word. The tape reached its end with a sound like a sigh. But the silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was the sound of a door that had never been locked, opening onto a road that had never existed. I remember the exact moment the door became a mouth. Not metaphorically, not poetically. An actual wet, grinding mouth opening in the middle of the midnight road, and I was already stepping through it before I could scream. The tape hiss rose like a tide around my ankles, pulling, always pulling, and Mara's voice, my voice, every voice, began to accelerate until the words themselves blurred into a single razor note of static. I tried to stop walking, but the soles of my shoes had melted into the magnetic sludge. Each step made a sound like tearing paper soaked in blood. The reel-to-reel in the asylum and the cassette deck in the studio, they weren't machines anymore. They were twin hearts beating in perfect sync, faster, faster, until the tape inside began to smoke and curl like burning hair. And I laughed, because what else do you do when reality decides to eat itself? The smoke smelled like every forgotten story ever recorded, bitter and sweet and wrong. Somewhere behind me, or maybe beside me, directions had given up, I could hear the phantom listeners, thousands of them, breathing in time with the spinning spools, waiting for the moment when the story would finally consume the storyteller. My own pulse matched the frantic rhythm. I was a metronome made of meat and regret. The midnight road stretched, not longer, but deeper, each footfall sinking through asphalt that had become hungry magnetic tape, recording every footstep, every heartbeat, every lie I'd ever told myself. Mara's voice cracked wide open. I say Mara, but by then I understood. There never was a Mara, just the first mask the broadcast wore when it learned how to sound human. The scream that ripped out of the speakers wasn't human at all. It was the sound of every frequency the human ear refuses to hear, crammed into one moment of impossible mercy. My teeth vibrated in their sockets. My eyes watered magnetic tears that clung to my cheeks like strips of recording tape. The reel-to-reel and the cassette, they weren't just spinning now. They were devouring. The tape fed into itself, a snake swallowing its own tail made of magnetic memory. And with each revolution, another piece of the world peeled away. The road beneath me liquefied into pure signal, and I sank ankle-deep, then knee-deep, then waist-deep in the static that had always been waiting beneath the pavement. I felt the moment my own edges began to blur. Not pain, worse, clarity. I understood that I had never been walking this road. The road had been recording me, one frame at a time, since the first second I pressed play. The burning tape wasn't destroying anything, it was developing, like film in darkroom chemicals. And I was the negative. The last frame of whatever I used to call a life flashed white hot, and in that white, I saw every listener who ever tuned in at midnight. Their faces? No, not faces, just the suggestion of faces, staring back from the static like drowned reflections. They weren't waiting for the story to end. They were waiting for it to begin again, with me as the new narrator. The tape snapped with a sound like a neck breaking. Silence. But not empty silence. Oh no. The hiss returned, soft as breath, on the back of your neck. And this time, it spoke with my voice. My exact voice. The same cadence I used to tell myself I was still human. "Welcome to the broadcast," it said, and I felt the words come out of a throat that wasn't mine anymore. The door was still open. The road was still there. But now I stood on the other side of the microphone, and somewhere out there, somewhere in the dark between stations, someone else was pressing play. I could hear them breathing, waiting. The static tasted like copper pennies and old regrets. The story isn't over. It never ends. It just waits for the next voice brave enough or broken enough to press record. I never pressed stop. The reel just kept spinning, feeding itself into the dark like tape made of midnight. Somewhere, a car radio crackled to life at exactly the strike of 12, and I swear, I heard my own voice greet me, calm, measured, already resigned. "If you hear the hiss," it said, "you're already in the tape." I laughed then, because what else could I do? The cycle had restarted, but this time, the road felt longer, like each loop stretched the asphalt another mile into nowhere. The car's headlights painted 2 tunnels of weak amber across the blacktop, and inside those tunnels, memories flickered. My memories, but older, worn thin from being played too many times. I could feel the steering wheel under phantom hands that weren't mine anymore. Every mile marker counted backwards, 100, 99, 98. Counting down to something I couldn't name. The radio hissed again, and between the static, I caught fragments of other voices, other versions of me, maybe. Each one starting the same story from a different ending. We were all just echoes, wearing each other's regrets like borrowed coats. The cassette clicked, not rewound, not fast-forwarded, just clicked, like it had decided where to begin without asking permission. That's when I noticed the road wasn't just longer, it was growing teeth. The yellow lines had become stitches holding the night together, and every scene I crossed pulled tighter. My voice on the tape started overlapping itself, creating harmonies of dread. This is Mara, broadcasting from the space between seconds. This is Mara, broadcasting from the space between seconds. Each iteration slightly slower, slightly deeper, like the tape itself was aging in real time. I wanted to reach for the dial, but my hands were already part of the static now. The hiss became a whisper, became a scream, became silence, but not the kind that brings peace. This was the silence of held breath, of the moment before a phone rings with bad news. The car's speedometer read 0, yet the landscape blurred past like watercolor in rain. I realized then that I wasn't driving anymore. I was being driven, steered by the same hands that once held microphones and promises. The tape doesn't record us. It recreates us, imperfect and hungry. Every loop added another layer of distortion, until my voice sounded like gravel soaked in regret. Midnight had become a place, not a time. I could walk its corridors now, past rooms where earlier versions of me argued with empty chairs, past kitchens where my mother left messages on answering machines that never existed. The cassette had become a house with infinite rooms, each one playing a different moment of my life at the wrong speed. I found myself in a basement made of magnetic tape, pulling strips of sound from the walls like old wallpaper. Every strip was someone's last words, someone's first lie, someone's middle-of-the-night confession that never made it to daylight. We were all just frequencies waiting to be found. But here's what the tape never told us. The cycle doesn't break. It just accumulates. Each new listener adds their own mile to the highway, their own room to the house. The hiss isn't empty. It's full of everyone who's ever heard it. A choir of static singing the same song in different keys. I felt them all pressing against me, the weight of 1,000 midnights crushing the air from my lungs. The red record light was still glowing somewhere. But now I understood. It wasn't recording me. It was recording the absence of me, the space where I used to be. The story isn't over. It never ends. It just waits for the next voice brave enough or broken enough to press record. Check your radio. Check the space between stations. Check the silence after the song ends. The hiss is already there, patient and hungry, threading itself through your speakers like ivy through bones. You think you're listening to it, but really, it's been listening to you all along. Welcome to 12 o'clock forever.